Stangibelisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1 GV, Whiskey 1 Good Vibrations. I have another little story to relate to you about my earliest experiences with electronics. This doesn't relate to ham radio specifically. And I may have done one or more videos having to do with this particular package before, but maybe not in the same context. Anyway, if something's that good, maybe I can repeat it. People ask me to do videos on certain topics, and I do them, and then I find out that I've done it before. I've done, I think, 3,000 videos or something like that. Anyway, I'm a video addict. I confess it. Along with benzodiazepines, I'm a YouTube addict and a ham radio, addict, but I haven't been on the air much lately. There have been so many thunderstorms, and I've been so sick that the only way I can make these videos is when I get a little interlude that I feel well enough to get out of bed. Boo-hoo, poor me. But anyway, this thing was like a little piece of pegboard, a little piece of perf board, about 10 by 12 inches or something like that. It had clip leads, various components, and you could make various circuits according to the little instruction manual provided with this board. And I was about the same age as I was when I got the walkie-talkies. I don't know which came first, the fried egg or the poached egg. But anyway, I was about 10 years old. That would have been in 1963, but I can't pinpoint the exact year. I might have been even younger than that. I might have only been 7 or 8 years old, because a little kid could do these. If a little kid could read and a little kid could stick clip leads on pins in a perf board, then a little kid could make these radio and electronics devices. And one of the devices was a shortwave radio receiver, regenerative, and they called it, and it had a 1T4 vacuum tube, I believe, and a 45 volt battery. It was a regenerative grid leak detector. That was the name of the circuit. And it really received a lot of shortwave signals, and I thought that was pretty fascinating. You could also make it work on the standard AM broadcast band with a simpler circuit. And that was the one that I built first. And I remember hearing an AM radio station on there, and I thought, gee, that might be pretty far away. I wonder where it is. But they never identified themselves, it seemed. I kept listening, and it seemed like they never said where they were. So my mother and I took this great big stereo phonograph record player. Remember those 33 1/3, 45 and 78 RPM discs that you slap down a spindle and put a little armature on there, and it would play these, quote, records, unquote. We called it a record player or a phonograph, but it was a real big thing. It was probably weighed 500 pounds. It's about 5, 6, 7 feet across and 3 feet, 4 feet high. And it had an AM radio receiver in it. Not a shortwave, unfortunately, but AM and FM it had. Standard AM and FM broadcast bands. So we tuned to the AM broadcast band on that radio until we found the station whose audio matched the audio coming out of that little perf board receiver. And we listened on that radio, and finally they identified themselves as WLS Chicago. Now we were in Rochester, Minnesota, and so Chicago would be some 500 miles away or something like that as the missile flies, as the DC-4, McDonnell Douglas DC-4 or DC-3 would fly. Can a DC-3 even go that far? But the signal could, and my mother and I thought that was just the coolest thing. That was DX. I was listening to a station 500 miles away on this little pegboard radio. My mother was just as cool as my dad when it comes to celebrating victories with me, little victories. And so this little kid and his mother danced around the living room. Wow, we got a station 500 miles away. And that was one of my earliest, maybe even predates the walkie-talkies. It also had a little circuit that you could make an AM broadcast transmitter using the earpiece, the earphone, as a microphone. And it would broadcast maybe 100 feet. And I remember making that and listening to that on that very same big 500-pound stereo radio receiver / record player. And I thought that was cool, and it indicated that I could generate radio signals. So that, but it just didn't seem to have the same thrill because it didn't allow for two-way communication, and its range was so limited that it was practically limited only to the house. I guess for a reason, so a little kid couldn't start uttering profanities and have the neighbors hear him. But the walkie-talkies, I think, were my main introduction to ham radio. But my introduction to electronics as a whole probably is that little perf board experiment kit. You can still buy those little things, but now they use transistors, and I'm not sure they work so well as that thing did. A vacuum tube and a 45-volt battery and then a 1.5-volt flashlight cell to keep the filament aglow. Oh, those were the days of early electronics for me. And I think maybe that was the very earliest of all. If you were as asked for stuff like this, now you got it, my friend. I hope you all enjoy this, and you can relate to all of us too. What was your earliest general electronics experience? Not just ham radio, but electronics in general. Can you relate to this? If so, let's hear it. Stan Gibilisco, W1GV, saying 73, and so long, which, of course, I don't think on that perf board radio, though, unless you popped a clip lead up and down on one of the pegs, translates to did-did-did-da-did-da, did-did-did-da-did-da.